Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Emma's Masterclass, Funding Your Next Music Project with beatBread. It's really great to see so many of you here. My name is Michelle Ronquillo, and I am Emma's event manager. Just a little bit about us. Within Emma, we unite music managers organization across 13 European countries, which represent more than 2,000 managers across Europe. We've made it our mission to strengthen European managers globally through the Empower program, which encompasses education, advocacy, networking, and research. Emma is a project co-founded by the European Union. If you want to know more about us, or if you want to stay up to date with the upcoming events, make sure to visit our website, follow us on social media, and join our WhatsApp group. Also sign up to our newsletter. We'll put links in the chat in a little bit. Within the chat, there is also a general manager contact list where you can leave your contact details and find the details of others. Also, when you log off Zoom at the end of the session, a super brief survey will pop up. Please take a moment to fill it out, as your feedback is super important for us. Now I'm going to share the event agenda of today. Please let me know that you can see it. Great. So today, we have Mark Terry, Head of Europe and Africa of beatBread. And as always, Jess will be moderating the conversation. Jess is our Executive Director. And yeah, don't forget to submit your questions in the chat. We'll make sure that they get answered. Without further ado, Jess, over to you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. And as you say, welcome to everyone and thank you for being here. It's great to see you. So I just wanted to start off with a quick word on how happy we are to partner with beatBread. beatBread are a really interesting platform, and I'm really excited for you all to find out a bit more about it, but also just about the various options of funding your work. I wanted to point out that we do have a previous masterclass, which was actually done by me, on funding your projects through applying for funding. So if you're looking for advice on that, I will share that in the chat. And that's just another way of doing that, of funding your work. So yeah, hopefully this can inspire you and help you understand your options a little bit better. I really love the beatBread outlook on these things, and how just transparency and options are really important when it comes to managers and understanding how to grow your artists. And we want to provide that as much as possible. So that is what the collaboration's about. But Mark, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself, and then you can kind of just take it away? I want to encourage everyone, sorry, just quickly, I want to encourage everyone to ask questions as much as possible. If they are specifically relevant to the section that Mark is talking about, I will interrupt and ask them right away. If they are something that can wait until the end, I will ask them then, along with any questions that were submitted in your signups as well. So yes, sorry, Mark, you can go ahead. Thank you so much for being here.
Great, thanks, Jess. Well, firstly, thanks for the invite. This is great to be able to talk to you all. A big part of what we do is spreading the word. We're 3 years old now, and the concept for the business came out of our co-founder and CEO experiencing a role at Universal a few years back. Both of our co-founders are ex-McKinsey, so they come from a very structured business background. But Peter, our CEO, was poached by Universal to go and run their artist partnership division in New York. And his experience of that was quite profound for him. And he left the business, having made a success of the role that he was in, with a very distinct impression that there was something broken in the music industry. And that the deals that were being done decades ago, and still being done until recently, weren't really fair for the artists. They weren't equitable. So he very much left the business and set out to try and find a way to solve that problem. So the North Star for our company is artist empowerment. That takes in supporting independent labels as well, but it's very much about trying to create a more equitable landscape for artists to exist in, and trying to support those that are helping them in that endeavor. So having looked at the industry and having sort of experienced it, he called on one of his other partners from McKinsey, who was a data scientist, or who is a data scientist, and he's our other co-founder, and asked him to look at the industry and to analyze the various forms of income, to try and find patterns and to try and work out whether there was another way to structure funding around artists and labels. And they spent a lot of time doing that. They looked at live, they looked at ticketing, merchandise, sync, all the obvious places, but glaringly, the most consistent form of income was streaming. You know, it was very tangible. You could watch records as they progressed. You could watch their decline. And John, who's our other co-founder, as I said, he's a data scientist. He used to build data platforms for the oil industry and the medical industry. He very quickly got his head around what was happening in the music industry. And he set out looking at 250,000 artists, several million tracks and several billion data points. And with his team, he built a machine, and its sole purpose was to analyze distributor reports and to look at streaming and streaming income. That machine's been a huge success and is the backbone of what we do, because it currently runs across the 1,100 deals plus that we have done. It's currently running at a plus or minus 2% accuracy rate. So that means if the machine makes a prediction, it's occasionally going to get it a little bit wrong. It won't always get it on the mark, but invariably the deals that we're doing, if we say that we can advance a certain amount of money in a certain term, the likelihood is that that advance will be recouped within the term. It'll recoup early rather than going over. So the thing that compelled me to the company was this kind of governance. It wasn't just a financial company pushing funds. It was having a real understanding of what the industry components were, the key metrics that were in place. And, you know, having spoken to funders recently, because we're doing a new raise, we raised 100 million in November 22. We are now raising more funds with cheaper cost of capital to improve the deals. But having spoken to funders, I mean, it's very clear that they see what we do and our underwriting in our deals as being the best in the industry. You know, the accuracy rate on the machine is something else at the moment. So that's kind of how we came into existence. And as I said, the North Star is artist empowerment. It's probably worth talking about where we see the industry at the moment. We try and take a very sort of agnostic view of it. We're not anti anyone. We're not anti the majors or anti distributors. We try and work with everyone. And our main linchpin really is artists. You know, we want to improve their choice. We want to give them more options and give them more power through those options. So my background is major label. I worked in the major label system for 30 years, ran majors for 20 years, most recently Columbia in the UK, but before that Atlantic and Virgin and EMI. So my experience was very much from the other side of the fence. I would see young artists coming in, we would do deals with them, and hopefully we would break them, you know, and I've had many artists that I've worked with that have broken and gone on to global stardom. What I started to see at the end of my tenure at Columbia was a slight shift in that trend. Streaming was impacting heavily. Social media in particular was impacting heavily. And we started to see, I think we were probably the #1 label in the UK at the time. We'd broken several acts. Acts were coming to us and wanting to do deals, but we also started to see acts coming to us and not wanting to do deals and being, you know, vehemently independent in their thinking. All to a background of Skepta, Stormzy, not signing deals and being independent. You know, we were looking at Georgia Smith and she was adamant she didn't want to sign a major label deal. So when I left Columbia, I was looking at other things to do. I ended up working in venture capital for a while. And beatBread were one of the companies that I found as potential acquisition, and was interested by what they were doing. And the key component for me was that it felt like the one thing that was missing in the industry as a solution, the funding aspect, they were solving the problem for. And that's really compelling as we move into this period of the industry, because I think particularly this year, the industry is going through a massive shift. We started to feel it last year, and I was talking to hundreds of managers in the UK last year, and there was definitely a change in attitude, but this year that seems to have moved really fast. So for context, the way that we see the industry at the moment, we're seeing the major system being far more cautious about the deals that they're doing. They seem to be relying on others to develop artists to a certain point where they then pick them up, potentially doing bigger deals. So they're becoming, I think, a bit more risk averse. I think they will probably say otherwise, but we see that playing out all of the time. That in theory should be great for distributors, because all of the majors have bought distribution platforms now, and they're pushing artists that they're not necessarily keen on getting fully behind and paying advances to and investing millions in to distribution platforms. But we're also noticing in the last 6, 8, 10 months that those distribution platforms are becoming less inclined to pay advances. And arguably, they're all providing a very similar kind of service. I don't want to say huge amounts about that, but I'm sure as managers, you've got your own views. But one of the key things that we want to try and instill in the industry is an understanding of what you actually get when you sign a deal, whatever that deal might be. And I think one of the issues with the major deals, and how they compare with, say, 10 years ago, is that the majors at one point were really the only conduit to success. You either sign to an independent label or you sign to a major. The majors were important because they had their own manufacturing plants. As soon as digital distribution came along, that really changed. That stranglehold on the industry was released, and other players started to turn up. But the majors still had key access to radio stations and to media and to retail. And, if they pulled a lever, that lever would be meaningful. And then obviously streaming platforms turned up, and Spotify, YouTube, we know what happened in that mix. But I think one of the key factors now is that whereas the industry used to tell the audience what to listen to and almost dictate what to listen to, they would curate that listening. The audience is now telling the labels what they want to listen to, and they're doing it through social media platforms. And the labels are now in a completely unusual position for them, in that they're having to follow that interest. So they've built huge analytics teams that are looking at YouTube trends and TikTok trends and trying to spot those artists as they start to emerge, and then they're chasing them. But there are lots of artists, as you know, that don't necessarily build in that way, that spend more time building their audience organically, going out, playing live, and just putting the foundations in place to grow brick by brick. That in itself creates a more equitable world, because rather than having to rely on a label, you can build an artist yourself. You can be a self-sustaining artist and build your own career by being very good at generating, social media content and those connections. And you can get a long way into your career. And that's what we're seeing happening at the moment. So we see a world where the majors certainly still exist. They are major rights owners. They have international networks. They have fairly deep pockets when they want to swing the bat. But they're probably a little bit more risk averse. They're maybe going to wait for 3, 4, 5 years, let someone else do the groundwork. And then when it comes to that artist wanting to scale up and amplify globally, they're in a perfect position to do that. There's probably no one better. They've got a network of 52 offices around the world. If they want to get behind an act, they're amazing at doing that. Distribution, I've already mentioned, you know, with distributors sort of moving further down the pipe as well, what we see is that there's this chasm that's left. And historically, artists would work with managers. Let's say the first year, 18 months, they'd build together, they'd start to play live, they'd get into the studio, make records. And there'd come a point where there was a pinch and you'd need funding. That was the point that a manager would generally start to walk up and down the high street, going into all of the majors and shopping deals. And that was very successful for many years. But the trade-off in that was that you were generally trading a large percentage of your rights, typically 80%, in perpetuity for that advance and for that support of the label. And that now seems to have changed. I think what's more typical is that you have managers, and let's actually now, you know, call managers labels, because I think essentially that's what you're becoming. You know, you're doing 1 year, 2 years, 5 years worth of work with your partner, who's the artist, to build a career. And with labels less inclined to come in early and pay advances, a lot of the time that's without funding. So we very much see ourselves dropping in and bridging that chasm and helping you to get across so that you can get funding, you can continue to build your artist career without having to trade your rights, because we don't take rights at any point, and that's a very crucial factor of this. And that's essentially why we opened. That's why we started doing business. Our aim is to be the biggest funder of independent music, frankly. We want to work with independent labels, with independent artists. We are starting to work out, in fact, I'll tell you the one thing that we don't do very well at the moment. We don't do early stage development of artists very well. We're not sitting here, much as we love music, we're not sitting here listening to music, critiquing it, and trying to guess whether that particular artist is going to be successful. Fortunately, we have the luxury of a machine and a business that's purely driven by data. So we are trying to fix that problem. We would like to be more supportive of early stage artists. And the way that we see ourselves being able to do that is to invest in the executives around them. So the managers, for instance. We have a couple of deals that we have done, one in the US, one in the UK, where we're trialing this. And that's actually to work with people that have experience of building artists, and we will invest in them. They'll be able to work with 2 or 3 artists. Once those artists are generating a certain amount of income, they can draw down a higher level of funding, and we continue to go. So the security for us, because we're not going to advance any further until they've created an income flow, and the security for them. And sorry, Jessica.
No, it's really, really interesting to hear about how it came about. But just in case anyone in the room doesn't know exactly what beatBread does, and they're a bit confused at the idea of this machine behind the scenes, it would be great if you could just give us like the quick overview of that, so that everyone is totally up to speed, just in case there's anyone who's not.
Let me do that now then. So as I said, there's a machine in the background. There is actually a great front-facing website that is essentially automated. So you can come in the front end and you can leave the back end with an advance without actually having to deal with anyone. However, as we're dealing with bigger artists, and we're doing that regularly now, and doing 6-7 figure advances, there's a lot more interpersonal contact. But essentially, this is where it started and this is where it continues. So probably 70% of our business now is driven through this website. And I'm going to go through this very quickly now, and just show you generally how this works, okay? So this is the site. You can find it at beatbread.com. Gives you the option to find out a bit more about us, but you can immediately start exploring and start looking at funding. So I'm going to spin through this quickly. So it's asking what you are. So I'm an artist in this case, and I'm going to put these guys in. Now, what we're doing here is we're accessing Spotify's database. It's the only time we do it, but if you're on Spotify, we're going to find you, and then you just simply select. And then you continue. And then it says, what type of advance do you want? So typically, the business started with master income from streaming. We've now developed that. So as of October last year, we're now doing publishing deals as well. So you can come in and you can take a master advance against your streams, or you can take an advance against your publishing, or you can do both. But in this case, I'm going to do it against master income. And I'm going to put, please ignore the numbers here because they're not relative. I'm just going to make them up as I go along. But I'm going to put 10,000 US dollars of monthly income for these guys. It's going to ask me which distributor I'm with. And there's a whole list of distributors that we work with here. I'm going to say that we're on DistroKid. And it's going to say, are you able to switch distributor? And in this case, I'm going to say yes. You may not be able to. That doesn't restrict you from getting an advance, but you'll see why down the line. And then again, you continue. It's going to ask me for my name. It's going to say, what relation am I? And let's say I'm a manager. And I'm going to put in my email address, and it's going to ask me for my phone number as well. And I can click forward. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky for me, because what we've done recently is streamline the whole site. So it's much, much faster. It used to take 20, 30 minutes for us to be able to come back to you and say, these are the kind of estimates that we can offer you. Now, that question that I've just gone through where we're asking about monthly income is the trigger that allows us to go very quickly to estimates. So I should be moving forward now to a screen that gives you an estimate range of the kind of advance that we would be able to offer you. And the next thing it's going to do is ask you to upload 6 months of distribution reports, which is a really key factor of what we do. They're very detailed. They're looking at every stream on every day in every country, and they can be 60 to 100,000 lines of data in those reports. I'm not going to show you that now, but that's the next stage that comes up here. Once you've uploaded that, you are then taken here. And this is basically what's happened once we've processed the reports. An artist, typically, the machine is going to take between 24 to 48 hours to process. And then we'll come back to you and give you a notification saying that your offers are available to view. So this is what you see when those offers are in place. And these are not estimates anymore. These are confirmed offers. And what the machine has done in the background is look at the distribution reports. It's not just looked at one potential option. It's looked at all of the options that you could take. So any decision that you as a manager or you as an artist might take about the kind of deal you want to do, it's already run those numbers. So when you come to this screen, which is essentially final checkout, this is where you can customize a potential deal. You can do that by using these sliders. There's about 200 different permutations of deals that you can access here. The top slider says, what do you want to include in the deal? Now, if it's very straightforward and you just want to include your catalog, then you just leave it over here to the left. But we also offer an option where you can factor in 5 new songs, or you can factor in 10 new songs. You can even build in an option, which is, in this case, is an option for 5 more songs. So you deliver 5 new songs. We pay you the advance once those songs are on the DSP. And then we have an option where you can deliver another 5 songs. And again, we pay you those, we pay that advance when those tracks are delivered. So you can see that there's a lot of flexibility there. I mean, one of the key covenants in our capital is that we have to have catalog in every deal currently. We don't envisage that will be the case probably within a couple of months. We'd like to get to the point where we're able to advance established artists who've lost their catalog because they don't have the rights to it anymore, but advance them on forthcoming future recordings. At the moment, we can't do that. We have to have catalog involved. in the future, hopefully that becomes a big part of what we do. Second slider here is very straightforward. So it's length of contract. Typically, we offer 1 year's, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year. And if I go to the end here, 20 years. There's occasionally an 8-year deal that comes up, but it's generally 1 to 5 years with artists, unless they're looking to take a significant advance against their catalog. And we do what we call temporary buys. So we'll offer you 20 years worth of income on the catalog, but we don't take the rights. We're just about to move to a point where we will offer to buy the rights, but it's a very similar process. I mean, that 20-year figure is going to be the equivalent to what we're buying for. So you've got lots of different options there, and you can see that these numbers move. Obviously, as there's more income going into the deal, you can see how the numbers ramp up quite quickly. And just finally, at the bottom here, before I talk about the numbers over here, at the bottom, this is the income that you can retain. So there are a number of different ways that you can structure a deal. You can tell us the ISRCs that you want to include, or you can say, I want to include my entire catalog, but I only want you to, I want to retain 30% of the income or 50% of the income. So I only want you to use 50% of the income generated by this catalog. So you can see we're trying to make this as flexible as possible. As you go further in, we even give you the option of how much you want to pay for cost of capital. So, you know, it's key for us to be able to be as flexible as possible, so that you can get, or the artist can get exactly what they need. So let me just talk through the numbers on the right-hand side. You can see this number at the top. So that's being driven by catalog on 1 year, and there's no flow through. And you can see how that number is going to increase as I go to 2 years. But let's stay with 1 year for the time being. So this is the advance number. It's important for me to mention here that we add 2.8% to that number. That's what we take as a fee. Whether it's $1,000 advance or $5 million, it's always 2.8%. So that leaves this number here very clear. So 168,000, we're adding 2.8% on top of that. That's what you will eventually recoup. The number here is what we call a recoupment rate, sometimes the royalty rate. And you'll have all experienced this in labels. You'll all see how this works. We use this terminology because it's familiar and because we're not a loan facility. We don't use interest rates. This is basically saying this recoupment rate on this particular deal, and the algorithm will change deals slightly. There are lots of different factors that kick in that drive these numbers. In this case, it's saying the recoupment rate on a 1 year deal is 90%. They're generally around 90% on 1 year. That means that for every dollar that we receive as income, 90 cents in that dollar is going to recoup the 168,000 plus our 2.8%. The remaining 10% is cost of money. And that doesn't come to us. That goes back to the investment fund to pay for the capital. So you'll see on a 2 year deal, on a 2 year deal, that number's changed. It's now 81%. And typically on a 2 year deal, it's around the 80% mark. Could be 79, could be 78. In this case, it's 81. So 81 cents in every dollar of income received is going to recoup this number. And 19 cents is going to the investment fund as cost of capital. And you'll see that play out across the years. So typically 3 years is 70%, 5 years is going to be around 60%, and we bottom out at 50%. So our 20-year deals are all 50-50. That means that 50% of the income generated is going to pay cost of capital, 50% is going to recoup the deal. To put that into perspective, because that may seem expensive if you're looking at interest rates. If you're doing a typical label deal, you're looking at sacrificing 80% of your income, let's say, on a traditional deal. 20% of the remaining income is going to recoup the advance and any expenses that the label have incurred, so the debit balance. What we're saying here is that we won't ever go below 50%. So you can guarantee that 50% of the income is going to recoupment and no more than 50% is going to cost of money. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense, but please, if there are any questions, let me know. So that's the kind of deal that we do. You know, we're here basically trying to enable you to make choices. We're not pushing terms, we're not pushing money. The system itself, you know, these numbers are not random. You're telling us the kind of deal you want to do. In this case, if you want to do a 2-year deal, the algorithm is saying that when we factor in all of the costs, the maximum amount that we would be able to advance to you is $280,000. That could be $10,000. You know, the size of these numbers is irrelevant. But the algorithm is telling us what we can advance. And what it's telling us is that this is the amount that we know, or the machine knows, you can recoup within the term. Now, for clarity, 80% of our deals recoup early, and we often have a step-up royalty. So that means that for the remainder of the term, the cost of money will reduce. Let's say you recoup at 10 months in a 12-month deal. The last 2 months, you may find that 90% recoupment rate, 10% cost of money reduces to a 94% recoupment rate and 6% cost of money. So you can see it gets cheaper. So as I said, we're trying to make this as flexible as possible. I think I mentioned this earlier, but you have the option to set a deal at 90% or set a deal at 80%, so you can set the cost of money. We have scenarios where you can end the deal at recoupment, and we generally offer slightly smaller advance. As I mentioned, the typical advance is, or the typical structure is that we have a recoupment rate and a step-up royalty if you recoup early. But you can also choose to leave 100% of your income in the deal until the term or recoupment, whichever's later, which means that we often offer slightly more because irrespective of early recoupment, you're leaving the income in. So many different structures there to play around with. And this site is not daunting. I would advise you to register, to play around with it. You can look at numbers. Unfortunately, you're restricted to 2 searches because we do get people coming on and putting in Beyonce and Jay-Z. And so we restrict the searches, but it's well worth playing around with. And if you do run out of searches, by all means, you can email me and I can clock up your search count. I just need to know what your email address is. Long term, we're now in.
Just quickly, Mark, we had a question here about, could the recruitment rate also go up as well as down?
That's a great question. And the categoric answer to that is no. So when we sign, in fact, you can actually see it here. There's a deal summary. So I won't go through this, but this is in the background. So as you've chosen the kind of deal you want, there's a deal summary here that basically outlines the terms. It's very straightforward. There's actually a longer document that you'll see as soon as you proceed, but that's very clear. So it tells you the costs, it tells you the advance total, the costs that are involved. And the reason for doing that is that it isn't going to change unless it changes to your advantage. So when we set the recoupment rate will be the same all the way through the term, unless you've taken the option to have a step-up royalty, in which case it will reduce if you recoup early in your favor. This is not an interest rate. We don't have compound interest. You know, going in on day one, as soon as you sign this agreement, you know what the rate is, you know how much it's going to cost. And the only thing that will change is if the deal recoups early, in which case everyone wins. If you don't recoup on the anniversary of the deal, all that happens is that we continue to recoup until you do. There's no penalty, there's no interest. We take the hit, but we stand by the algorithm, and the algorithm so far hasn't let us down. So publishing is fairly straightforward. We ask for song splits. We ask to see 4 quarters of PRO reports. We do look at the distribution reports because they obviously tell us a huge amount as well. And we will ask for publishing reports as well. And again, that's 4 quarters. So we have a new head of publishing in the US. He's coming from BMG. And we are, I think, probably about 30 publishing deals in, but increasing at a rate of knots. Our partner in publishing is Cobalt. And they actually approached us initially because they wanted to be in business with us. And we were finding that we had a lot of artists from around the world that were turning up without having any publishing in place. So we now offer them very low cost admin through Cobalt. And hopefully that's stopping them losing any income into, you know, the Black Box or MLC in the US, and giving them a bit more structure around their careers. As I mentioned, we have just announced that we have launched a funding network. We hope that funding network will grow. And that essentially puts us as an option alongside distributors. In the future, it could put us alongside other funders. And for those of you who have, you know, compare the market type websites for insurance or whatever it might be, I suppose it's something like that for the music industry. It gives you the ability to say, if I use my catalog, what kind of deal can I get? If it's just purely funding, it's probably the numbers that you're looking at through beatBread. If it's through a distributor, you know, the distributors that we're working with will set their own parameters. So they'll say, if the algorithm is saying 100,000, we'll add 10% more. And in which case, we'll be saying, go and do that deal. If it feels right for you to work with that distributor and you understand all of the mechanisms in the background, take the deal if that 10% is important to you and you're prepared to sign a term agreement or whatever it might be. And I think that's true of our view on artist deals. You know, we're not saying don't do a label deal by any means. We're just saying be really cognizant of exactly what that label deal entails. Because invariably it's a right share. And invariably that right share is not just a few years, it can be in perpetuity. But everything is kind of needs to be weighed up. The other thing that we have in the background that we're developing, we've actually got up and running and we're using, is an analysis tool so that we can actually ingest other offers and compare them to what we're offering. Sometimes we're going to lose in that. You know, we are not going to offer the most amount of money in comparison to some of the distributors because we're restricted by the algorithm. The algorithm is telling us what, you know, the governance that we need to have. A year deal is going to recoup in this, you know, it's 12 months and this is the amount that can recoup. So a distributor doesn't have those restrictions to work within. They will offer what they want to offer depending on what their company policy is. And some majors basically work on the basis of market share. So they'll overpay. So we won't always necessarily be the biggest offer, but we'll always be the most realistic because it's data driven. I think
we have quite a few different questions actually.
Okay, great.
Ready. Do you want to you can stop sharing your screen if you want. I'm not sure how, but for some reason it seems like people can draw on the screen for some reason. Sorry about that.
I just saw that. I wondered where that had come from.
Yeah, I saw names popping up. I was like, what is happening here? Anyway, yeah, thank you for that. It's super interesting. And I really want to emphasize this point of the fact that you will have this funding, what's it called again? The funding.
But the funding network has just been announced.
Yeah, the funding network has just been announced. And I just really want to point this out that will be a super useful tool for people to be able to compare what they can get everywhere. It's not about saying beatBread is the only option or the best option. It's about saying, hey, these are your options with your new music or previous music.
And it needs to grow. There are only a few partners in there at the moment. We're currently working with United Masters, with Two Lost. I think Downtown Music are in there. And you know, we hope that's going to grow and we get more of the distributors coming on board. I mean, we are working with over 40 distributors globally, including the likes of Virgin, The Orchard. It would be amazing if they were actually in the mix in the funding network as well, but let's see.
One day.
One day.
No, it's great that it's happening already, just to even simplify and help managers especially understand what their options are. So to move to some of the questions, is there a minimum stream revenue requirement?
There is. For artists, it's about $100 of income a month. That very, very roughly equates to about 15,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, or 10 to 15,000. And at that level, the advance is probably only $1,000, $2,000. Our average advance, I'm told, is about 75,000, but our biggest advance to date was for 5 million, or just sub 5 million. And with the new funding that we're putting in place, there isn't really an upper ceiling. I think we could do a deal at any level.
Amazing. Great. I hope that thoroughly answers that question. Okay, the next question is a bit long. So the success of recruitment is closely connected to a good promotion strategy, marketing, touring, ads, airplay, all of that kind of thing, and the artist going out there to promote the songs. Do you expect any plan that is accompanying the release of new music? Is there proof to give how I spend the money?
No, not at all. We have no governance on that. We don't set any restrictions on what the money's spent on. If you wanted to take an advance against your catalog and go on a holiday to the Caribbean, we wouldn't advise it, but that's totally in your gift. So no, there are no restrictions.
Amazing. And yeah, it's not about showing what you're going to do, because it's all based on this algorithmic proof of work, I guess, proof of stream. So it's not so much about providing those new marketing plans.
And in reality, part of artist empowerment is giving an artist the ability to choose, to empower their catalog, to empower their copyright for whatever they need it for. Hopefully that's to invest in their career and to grow. But, you know, we have scenarios where we have rights holders that come to us and they want to take a larger advance and buy a house or furnish a studio. It's entirely up to you.
And one other question, can you tell us about the admin fee with Cobalt? How does that work? How much?
I'm going to struggle to do that, I'm afraid, because publishing is not my bag particularly. There are no services with Cobalt. It is low cost, and it's designed to basically be a very low cost of entry to encourage people to get their publishing agreement in place. I'm afraid I can't actually tell you what those costs are, but by all means, email me and I will get the answer to that question for you.
That's all our questions in the chat right now. Just to outline it, it would be great to know a bit more. Obviously, you've mentioned throughout your presentation about how it compares to a label in some kind of ways, but do you have any kind of more just straightforward, like with a label you will not retain your rights? How does that change things? Just going to the basics of how you operate as an artist, like what does it allow you to do that you wouldn't otherwise be able to if you did sign away with your rights?
That's a really good question. I mean, that's something that I've agonized over, because as I said, I've been on the other side of the equation. And typically artists that I would sign would be signing 80-20 deals. So we would take 80% of the income in perpetuity. If they recouped, they'd receive 20%, whatever their royalty rate was. But invariably, you know, I don't know what the figure is, but let's say 94%, 95% of artists never recoup, carry a debit balance with them, and are maybe in debt. And some of the biggest artists in the world have never recouped. What does it do? Well, historically, it gave the majors or labels lots of rights. You know, they essentially owned the master recordings of those artists. The artists would make
Is it
Sorry.
just, sorry, does it allow you then to say yes to syncs or something like that that you wouldn't otherwise be able to by retaining these rights, by holding?
No, I think it, as an artist, it puts you in the driving seat.
Mhm.
It basically allows you to own your own rights. You've created the composition and you own it, and you're earning income from it. And I suppose the real answer to that question is that historically, there was a reason to trade those rights. Sometimes you had to, or sometimes the label was offering you so much added value that they were giving you the means to success. I think the reality is that's probably not true anymore. So giving up 80% of your rights to a label that doesn't really have the ability to pull the levers that deliver that success, maybe isn't the best idea. Whereas, you know, if you look at some of the biggest artists in the world, what you'll find, a commonality between all of them is that, or most of them, is that they have teams in place that they're their own teams that they've employed for many years and they trust. You know, when you sign to a label and you take on a team, you don't have the say of who distributes your music. From then on, it's that label that's distributing your music. You don't have a say in who's marketing your music or who the PR is often. Sometimes you're allowed to go and get third-party services in, but not always. So again, it speaks to artist empowerment. It's giving you freedom and empowering your choice.
Amazing. Are there any last minute questions? Does anyone, or is there anything else you want to share with us, Mark? It's been a really great demonstration. I appreciate that.
No, that's great. There isn't anything more that I need to share. What I would say is to reiterate, please just play around with the site, sign up, use it. If you have any further questions after this, please just email me. I don't know if the email's been circulated, but please feel free.
No, we can circulate it with the recording. No, that's fine.
Yeah. And I would be very happy to sort of speak to anyone if they have any kind of cases that they'd like to bring. You know, we can run numbers very quickly and hopefully come back to you and provide you with some options.
Amazing. I'm looking through what the questions that people came to us with in the signups, and honestly, a lot of it is just trying to understanding what beatBread is. That was most people's main aim for the session.
Right.
So I think very thoroughly have done that. And yeah, it's a really interesting tool, and it's just presenting another option for you as managers, another option for you to fund your artist's work, to retain rights, and also for whatever your next step might be. And
I think that's our goal as well. I mean, if nothing else, we've always just wanted to be another option. When you're considering, do I do a label deal? Do I do a deal with a distributor? We just like to sort of be that third option. I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't considering what that could look like. It means probably a bit more work because you're putting your own team together, but it certainly means a lot more freedom as well.
Oh, for sure. And I know so many artists who've been taken from their teams when they've signed major label deals, or, you know, they've gone to a certain label, and it happens all the time. So that's a really important point about what you can retain. But yeah, it does give you more freedom to say what you want to happen with your music and where you want it seen. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. As always, we'll be distributing the recording through our sign up to everyone who signed up. And we will share Mark's information as well, so you can get in contact and if there's anything you want to know more about it. So yeah, hopefully you can all consider your options and do something new. I can't wait to see what comes of this. So just to remind you, when we close the session, you'll get a little questionnaire pop up. So please do answer that so that we can get a bit more information about what's useful to you and how Emma can support managers in the future. Yeah, everyone's super interested. This is great. Thank you. In the chat, people are really being excited about this tool. So thank you for bringing it to us. And we will talk to you soon. We'll keep you all updated with the beatBread updates and information as well through our mailing list and through our WhatsApp group and everything. So please, yeah, stay on top of that.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the invite.
Thank you. Bye.